Hi everyone, welcome back to my garden. Today we're going to be talking about 10 edible ground covers that I either have growing in my garden or I plan to put in my garden. And these are all ones with many different beneficial relationships. It's not just one food source that you're getting from the plant. It's not just one benefit that you're getting from the plant. It is a whole lot of them. And that's the key to planting plants in your garden, is to look for ones that will have multiple beneficial relationships, and that way you're getting the most out of each plant that you're choosing. You're getting the most out of the space that you're utilizing to grow that vegetable, and that way your whole garden can work together to thrive and help each other. So to create this sustainable garden that provides food all year round, I'm going to start converting more and more of my gardens into an edible food forest style. It's quite windy. So first up we have sweet potato, and that is the plant that you can see behind me. It is not only growing as a ground cover, but it also is climbing up this trellis that I have here. It is something that you could grow vertically if you were limited on space. You can also grow sweet potato in a pot or a container, but sweet potato is an awesome ground cover because it has so many beneficial relationships. It is one of my number one permaculture plants, and the leaves of the sweet potato are edible. So these can be used as a substitute for spinach. I like to throw these in a stir fry, in a curry, in soups, even in some smoothies, or even just a side dish of their own. They're really good, just sauteed in a pan with garlic and butter, or some soy sauce, tamari, chili, anything like that. Another reason I love growing sweet potato is they produce a substantial amount of food. So they grow a lot of root crop underground, plus they have the edible greens on the surface. So you can eat these whilst the plant is growing, so you sort of get a continuous supply of food from growing sweet potato. And the root crops that you do grow can be quite large, and there's quite a lot of them, so they do provide a lot of food. The sweet potato roots can be used for both sweet and savoury dishes, so that is always a bonus, is having something that is adaptable for both sweet and savoury. And this means they create a really good base crop to build other dishes from, both sweet and savoury, meaning it's a really versatile crop to grow. And because they are so thick and lush and retain moisture, they are the perfect place for our beneficial insects to live. So this is a really good habitat for our local wildlife and our insects, things that are going to help create a balanced ecosystem. I don't have a pond, and I don't know if anyone around me has a pond, but this area here that is quite shaded and has a really thick layer of sweet potato, I've been finding heaps of frogs. They're also really hardy, they're drought tolerant. Although they may not produce as well if they are under stress from lack of water, they will still grow. So if you do get dry periods, they may wilt down, but as soon as it cools down again, they will pop back up, and you can just give them the water and they're good to go. So they are really drought tolerant and hardy plants. They're also super easy to grow and propagate, so they can be used to swap and trade with other people. There are quite a few different varieties of sweet potato, and they all have a little bit of a different taste and texture, so it can be a really good one to swap and trade, or even sell to get back a little bit of income from your garden, to buy more plants obviously. You can just take cuttings and pop them in a jar of water, and they will sprout roots and regrow, or you can just simply chuck them in the soil. As long as they are kept well watered, they will grow as well. And you can grow them from the root, so the actual sweet potato itself, you can chop that up and chuck that in the garden and it will grow, or you can put that in a jar of water as well and it will sprout shoots and grow. It is a really easy one to replicate and put in other areas of your garden. Okay, I could go on forever with sweet potato. If you hadn't noticed, I really love sweet potato. It's definitely my number one ground cover. And number two is the Nasturtium, and this is another one of my favorite edible ground covers, and it is something that I grow here in this section of my garden as well, and that tends to be something that grows a lot more in the cooler periods. It's actually worked out that my Nasturtium crop will grow for the cooler months of the year, and then when it starts to get too hot, it dies down, and the sweet potato likes the warmer months of the year, so that's when that will pop up and start regrowing as well. So those two have a really good relationship in my garden, and they cover the soil, they provide nutrients and places for the insects, as well as providing food for me all year round. So nasturtiums grow in a very similar way to sweet potato. They have a really thick, lush layer of leaves and leaf coverage, and they have lily pad like leaves as well, and that helps protect the soil from the harsh sun. It helps retain moisture. It gives our beneficial insects a lot of places to live. They also have lots of flowers, so that attracts all our pollinators, which are going to help pollinate our fruits and our vegetables to give us better harvests. So that is another great reason to grow nasturtium. They also have edible seed pods, so you can pickle those and they're really delicious as well. You can eat the leaves, you can eat the stems, you can eat the flowers, and you can eat the seed pods. So they do provide lots of different food sources, and they are super low maintenance, easy to grow. They can be quite invasive though, so that is something definitely to consider, that if you don't want them overtaking your garden, or you have a small area and you only want them to grow in one specific small area, then the nasturtiums might not be right for you. They do have a weed-like invasiveness. They also do attract and make home to a lot of our less desirable insects, so that can be things like slugs and snails. But this is actually a good reason to grow them, because that means that all the slugs and the snails will hang out there in the nasturtiums and they won't be off eating all your other plants. And if you do have chickens, and you can grab a whole bunch of nasturtiums and chuck them in for your chickens, and that will be lots of food for them, having all those slugs and snails trapped in there, and your chickens will love you for it. A lot of people do grow them sort of around the edges of things, and that kind of acts as a barrier and a trap to trap all of those undesirables in, and you can just chop them off and chuck them in for the chickens. The leaves are quite peppery, and you can use those in salads, and I also use them as like mini wraps and for serving things on, so they're really fun and easy to use. You can also make pesto out of them, and the flowers as well are edible, so you can pop them in salads. They're really bright, they're really colourful, and they make your dishes look amazing. So I have got heaps of nasturtium recipes on my website, so I'll pop a few of my favourites in the description below. So if you are growing nasturtiums, or you want to grow nasturtiums, then definitely check those out, so that you can get the most out of everything that you grow. So another one we have is a really delicate ground cover that is more suited to the shade, and that is sweet violets. So sweet violets I've got growing in a shady area of my garden, and they do get a little bit overtaken with the sweet potato at times, but they sort of do grow all year round in this shady area, and they provide a really thick, low, matte type of edible ground cover, and they have edible flowers as well. So you can eat the leaves on the sweet violet. They're quite small, they're a little heart-shaped, so they're more so, I use them more as like garnishing and on top of salads and things like that. I wouldn't necessarily use them as an edible crop. More so I use them as a living mulch, as a ground cover to protect the soil and to give a place for my beneficial insects to live. The edible flowers are really delicate and can be used in baking. A lot of people use them on cakes and do sugar coating with them, so they're another great one to grow. Alright, so another one, number 4, is strawberries, and I feel like this one's quite self-explanatory. Strawberries are an amazing edible ground cover because they produce delicious strawberries. So strawberries, although they do prefer more full sun, they can grow in the shade, and so if you do want to use them as an edible ground cover, they will produce less strawberries if they aren't getting adequate sunlight, but they will still produce strawberries, and they can be probably more beneficial to areas that aren't quite established yet. If you have areas that don't have really big shaded trees, then those areas might be really good to have strawberries. So as well as having the edible strawberries, the flowers are also edible, and I use those sometimes when I'm wanting to make something extra special, like a cake or a special occasion cake or some sort of baking. I will pop a few strawberry flowers on there because they are so pretty. They look like little daisies, but obviously if you are picking your strawberry flowers, that means you're going to have less strawberries. So it is something to consider, and it is something that I only usually pick a few of. Or if the plant is really small and young, then picking those flowers can help give the plant time to really grow and expand before it's having to put all its energy into the fruit. So that can be another way to do it, is to pick those flowers when the plants are really small to help encourage more growth. And strawberries send out runners and more plants, so it can be quite easy to grow more and spread them throughout your garden. The strawberry leaves are also edible. That is something I don't really use very often, and I would definitely suggest trying things in moderation if you haven't used them before. But strawberry leaves are often used to make teas, to dry and use in tea. So strawberry leaf tea, they can be really beneficial for digestion and inflammation. So if you do want to grow strawberries as a ground cover, it can be a good idea to look for your alpine varieties. So there are alpine varieties that are more used to growing as ground covers in rocky areas and things like that. And they can come in like the red strawberry, and there's also a white one which tastes a little bit like pineapple. They grow a lot smaller strawberries and sort of smaller plants, but they can be a lot hardier and they can be a lot more easier to grow as a ground cover with not needing as much sunlight. Alright, so number 6 we have is chamomile. So you can get a few different varieties of chamomile, and one of them is often called the lawn chamomile. And this is a low-lying edible ground cover, and sometimes it's even used as a substitute for lawn, which is amazing. If we can grow something that's edible instead of lawn, I am all for that. I am not about this lawn here that gets watered and cared for and is mainly used for where the dog goes to the toilet. So it is, if I had my way, we would have no lawn, but it is also kind of nice to have lawn too. So an edible lawn would be the best of both worlds. Although I don't think you want to be eating your lawn if the dog is pooing on it. Okay, scratch that. But it is a really good edible ground cover, and the flowers can be used in teas. They have a real calming property, so a lot of time they're used in sleepy teas or to calm anxiety and things like that. So having that growing in your garden as an edible ground cover can be a really good one for saving and drying and preserving to later use for medicinal qualities. Number 7, we have rosemary. So there are, again, like the chamomile, there are different varieties of rosemary. I have a huge rosemary bush, but that is more vertically growing rosemary. But you can get some rosemary varieties which are ground covers. They grow along the ground and they cover and protect that soil. They are usually grown in like rock walls and things like that. They can cascade down. They are really hardy. They can grow in harsh, dry conditions, more so for full sun locations. So rosemary is a favourite in my garden because it has so many benefits. The flowers attract all of the bees, so those are going to help pollinate your fruit and vegetables, and also that the flowers are really nice. They have a subtle rosemary flavour, so I use those as well in like baking. If I want something to be a slight hint of rosemary, I will use my rosemary flowers. Use the leaves in cooking, in baking, in teas. You can add flavour to your meals, great for skincare and healing properties, anti-inflammatory properties, boosts your mental clarity and focus, improves digestion, aids in hair growth, and also has calming and therapeutic qualities. So the rosemary is a powerhouse. One is one of the staples that you can have in your garden that you can use for a whole lot of different things, from medicinal to culinary. I really do rate having a rosemary plant in your garden, whether you do have it as an edible ground cover or you have a taller bushy tree thing. Number 8 is Purslane. So Purslane can grow as a weed. It is more of an edible weed, and it can just pop up and anywhere in your garden. I have it in certain areas and I just let it grow. It sort of looks like a succulent. You can use it, pick it and use it on fresh on your salads, top it on your soups, your stir fries, everything like that. It is a edible weed and I love it. So it does have little delicate flowers too, but they're really small. But that is another great one if you do have that growing in your garden as a weed. Then you can just let it do its thing and also eat it as well. So number 9, we have red clover. So that is really popular in permaculture gardens and in food forest systems or in regenerative agriculture. It is something that is often grown as a cover crop in between growing other crops because it is nitrogen fixing. It is putting nutrients into the soil. It's also got edible flowers that attract heaps of pollinators, so that also helps boost your garden's production. It is also used as a medicinal herb. It's often used and dried for teas as well. It provides a nutritious feed for animals, so that's another reason that it's used as well. Don't plant it in your vegetable patches though, because it can get away, it can be a little bit invasive. Probably more suited to larger scale areas and orchards and things like that. If you are growing other smaller things, it may sort of smother those out. Lucky last, number 10, is more a general one, and that is just herbs such as thyme and oregano grow as a low-lying ground cover. Herbs do need adequate sunlight, so just pop them in little patches where there isn't huge amounts of shade above and they can get enough light. I have sage in areas of my garden, as well as parsley, thyme, oregano. Mint can be a really good one, but that's something that I wouldn't plant in the open areas like the garden. That can be really invasive, but if you do have containers, then that mint can be used there. Or if you have sort of garden bed, again, I'd be very careful with this because it does send runners under the ground. It's kind of like the kikuyu of herbs. Yeah, that's definitely something to consider. Thyme can be really nice and hanging over the edge of your garden, and that can be used in lots of cooking and culinary ways to flavour your food, as well as medicinal qualities that you can dry and use in teas. And a lot of them also have flowers, so that again is going to bring in your pollinators and help you get more food from your garden. There are so many more edible ground covers. This is just 10 of the ones that I either grow or I am planning to grow. Some other ones that you can grow are Warrigal Greens, that is a New Zealand spinach, and that grows a really lush ground cover as well that you can then eat. Overall, our edible ground covers are going to act as a living mulch. They're going to protect the soil, they're going to keep the moisture in. It is a really good idea to grow ground covers, especially if you're looking to do a food forest style or a low maintenance sustainable garden, to encourage our microorganisms, to encourage our worms. Giving that healthy environment is going to improve our soil, and soil is the key to growing a healthy garden. If you get the soil right, if you continually work on your soil and build your soil, growing plants is just going to be so much easier. Edible ground covers are also a really good way to reduce your weeds. They smother them, they cover them, and they stop them from being able to get as much light. So that's another way that they can help your gardens be more low maintenance, is that you don't have to weed them all the time because you're growing food instead. So that's another reason I love edible ground covers.